Hello, hello, and welcome to the second half of season 5. I can't believe that we're already halfway through the year. My name is Debbie Heiser. I help entrepreneurs make a lot of money doing what they love without sacrificing what's important to them. I feel an urgency to help people let go of past messaging so that they can lead a lit up life. And with that, I want to again welcome you. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the show.
Straight from the corners of my mind is where I find my sanity. It's a place, another land, another time.
Hello there. Before we get started with this week's episode, I wanted to pop in here just really quickly and offer up to you 2 different ways that you can work with me. I have private clients that I work with throughout the year to help them quantum leap their business, identify what they want their life to look like so that the business becomes a conduit to that versus running their life. And then the second one is a women's mastermind. This is the second one to kick off, and I'm so excited to start this one in 2024. And I believe the retreat is going to be potentially in Belize, but keep an eye out for it. But this is where we get together, again, quantum leap your business, but it's with a group of other really high vibrational, successful business women that want to level up, want to continue to progress in their achievements and in their business. So with that, click away on the website and check out those exciting events. I'd love to either see you as a private client or in the 2024 Women's Mastermind. Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. My name is Debbie Heiser, and I help entrepreneurs make a lot of money doing what they love without sacrificing what's important to them. And I have here with me today my friend Maggie Farrington, who is up in Canada. Up north, way up north. One of these days I'm going to get up there. And Maggie and I met, oh gosh, I don't even remember what year it was. I don't even remember.
Let's not say.
No, we won't. But did we have class together, or was
Yes.
okay?
Because I get together, I think.
Sometimes. So we took this class together that I now teach at Gonzaga about foresight and strategy, and we just hit it off, man. We went to Target, we did all this fun stuff, and we really created this, what I consider a special relationship, because Maggie and I are the type of people that we might go a year and a half and not talk to each other, and then we get on the phone and we're like, how are you? What's happening? You know, like what's going on in the life? We follow each other on social, and so it's kind of fun to do that. Part of what intrigued me about you, Maggie, is just this journey that you've been on from a leadership perspective, and then leading an Indigenous tribe in Canada as the CEO through a lot of different things, you know, not just what's happened in the last 3 years, but prior to that. And so I really just want to get into a discussion with you about your journey, about the journey that you've had as the leader of that organization, and then maybe even talk about some things that you might recommend to new leaders. But before we get started, I want Maggie to introduce herself professionally, because she can do that, well, and personally can do that much better than I can. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Debbie. I'm so excited to be here and be part of the amazing things that you're doing, and share just like a little slice of my experience that may resonate with your listeners and with the people you work with. So let me see. My background is in law. I actually went to law school and then practiced as a lawyer for about 8 years. I did criminal defense and then criminal prosecution. And it never sung to me. I didn't feel like that was the right place for me, but I think I was like kind of stuck in that space of, I really invested in this career and kind of nervous to leave. So I think one of the greatest gifts I gave myself was finding the courage to change careers. And now as I'm older, I really realized that like the book of life has many chapters, and you don't have to stay in the same one because that's what you went to school for. Because the work I do now as CEO of Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation, which is about 1,300 members, but in a tiny remote community in northern Alberta, almost at the Northwest Territories. It doesn't have a road to the community, so it's only accessible by plane, by boat, or, you know, our winters are really, really wintry here, which I think, Debbie, it's probably the same for you. Yeah, so there is a winter road in the winter that only lasts a few months or so. But yeah, many chapters in the book of life, and it's okay to experience new ones. I think the Swifties today would probably call it eras. So I think I'm going to adapt that. I have many eras, and right now I'm in my wonderful area of serving this First Nation, which I really feel is the greatest honor and calling in my life. I have Indigenous background from my mother's side in Ontario, which is on the other side of Canada. And so I'm Métis, but working with a First Nation is an absolutely wonderful experience. I feel like I'm talking too much.
Oh no, not at all.
Okay.
No, keep going.
So like, you're the host, ask questions. I'm like, you know what that is? That's my legal background, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, then I'll get there. I'm jotting down things I want to go back to. You're good.
So yeah, understanding that there are chapters in your life, there are different areas in your life was really powerful to me.
Yeah.
Because it gave me courage, and frankly, it inspired other people in my life, like even family members, to reassess their lives, what's not serving them in their career. And a family member went to a different whole career because I had the courage to change without really knowing what the change was going to look like. And since we moved from Toronto to where we are now in Fort McMurray, Alberta, our lives, our family life is so different. My personal life is so different. And I'm just completely grateful that I was able to listen to that inner voice and really connect with, again, what I feel is like a calling in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. And Megan, let's talk about that. First of all, I want to go back because some people don't know what that means to have a winter road, right? That's where the lake freezes over and you can actually drive across the body of water, right? Or no?
That would be an ice road. So
okay,
I spent some time in Nunavik, which is like north of the Arctic Circle. I spent 3 months there working with a nation on their self-government way back when. We won't say what year. But yeah, we had to take an ice road from Nunavik to a town called Tuktoyaktuk. And now 20 plus years later, they have a real road, but that was going on the Arctic Ocean. And this is me coming from like urban downtown Toronto, landing in the Arctic and then driving on the Arctic Ocean the next day. So life experience. So winter road is it is snow and ice, and you do some river crossings, but it's not like the whole way across.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
remote.
I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what that was. So fabulous. Thank you. Okay. And I want to talk too about, this impact to others. I find so many times that leaders don't realize that they're impacting so many people when they do step up with courage, when they have resiliency, and they step into these things that other people look at them and say, wow, I wish I could do that. And then all of a sudden it adds some courage and it creates like a ripple effect. Can you think of another time, either for yourself or maybe someone else, that did something that impacted you in a way that was a little surprising? Like gave you courage or gave you some gift?
One thing, and this is kind of as I get older, my drive, my hunger, my ambition is still there, but now manifests in a new way, in a way that includes more maybe personal boundaries. Boundaries seems like kind of a naughty word to say, but creates that separation between your work life, your personal life, your family life, or whatever outside life you have outside of work. And watching other people do that gave me courage that, maybe I can do that too. Because I think the key to not burning out is to have that personal time. Creating that, if it's a day, a week, or an afternoon, or just some period of time to have that sacred time disconnected from devices or thoughts about work, but just being in yourself, in your own space, doing something creative that you wouldn't normally have time to do. So I am considering this a lot. It is a practice for sure, because I am so far from perfection, just like most people, a lot of people maybe that have, I probably got that inner anxiety of, I want to do well. I want to, I don't want to miss anything. I don't want to be a part, so I feel a strong connection to my phone, and watching others though disconnect and have that time for themselves really gave me courage to dip my toes into that. And, it perfectly aligns because in 2021, I began my journey to converting to Judaism. And of course, a key pillar of living a Jewish life, an observant Jewish life, would be to respect or observe Shabbat. So Sabbath, like a sacred time where you're disconnected from the outside concerns and just focusing on your family, reading, writing, and I think I said this already, but that digital detox, if it's in a non-religious way. So watching others do that and realizing as I get older that everything is equally as important. And
what's that done for you? Like, because I noticed, like, even speaking with you today before we got on, like, there's a different level of peace and groundedness to you that, like, it's at a different level than what I've seen in the past. Not that it was bad in the past at all. It's just a different level of peace for you. And so maybe I just answered my own question, but like, what has converting to Judaism and observing the Sabbath, like, what has that done for you?
I would, attribute it to being more conscious of having that sacred day or that sacred time of the week. And sacred can be used like in a non-religious context too, right? It's just that it's important, it's distinct. One of our professors, Dr. Horseman, he used to be a professor at Gonzaga. I'm sure he's still around and talks to you all the time, but I remember he always talked about like thresholds. And when you go through a threshold or you go through a new threshold, you're on the other side, conscious of what is past, but now you're in this new space. And so that's what I consider like the transition from the worries of the world to passing through that threshold on Friday night at sundown, and then celebrating that time to be who I am and be with my family, be more present. And not only does that help with like rest, but it also helps like with rejuvenation. Like if we're going full tilt 7 days a week, 18 hours a day, which is frankly what I was doing before, kind of trying to prove it to others that probably didn't even care anyway, that I was like the most perfect at the most everything, but just creating burnout, anxiety for myself. So yes, Judaism, but also age. As I get older, I'm certainly like more comfortable with who I am and who I'm not. And of course I want to do well. Of course I want to serve the First Nation I work for with like my whole self, my whole being, and the same for the team that I lead. But I can't be whole if I'm not resting. I need that time to fill up my own, I hate that phrase, but fill up your own bucket, do that soul filling exercises, whatever they may be for you.
Yeah. And, Maggie, it's interesting as you're saying that, because we joke, I'm with a group of ladies that we do some masterminding for our business, and we just got back from a trip, and, sometimes we joke that, hi, my name's Debbie, I'm a recovering perfectionist. Right. And so the older I get, the more and more I remember what Christine Hasek, I think you've met Christine.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. what she always says is everything's perfectly perfect, right? Like
I remember her saying that.
Yeah. And the older I continue to get, and the more I feel comfortable with myself, and I'm recovering from this idea of living up to other people's expectations of what they think is perfect, I'm like, it just is, right? Like my journey is perfectly perfect the way it is. And so when you said that, I was kind of going, oh yeah, the older I'm getting, I'm kind of doing the same. Yeah. So
it's living up to others people's expectations, but that's only in your mind, because when you actually connect with those people, they have none of those expectations for you. They expect you to be human. They expect because if you're perfect, then they have to be perfect too, and no one's ever going to be like that, right? So
we create these big stories in our heads, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah. The more and more I learn about neuroscience, the more and more I hear that. So yeah.
Yeah, like the energy, the passion is still there, but that like the sinister dark side of like the hustle, or romanticizing or fantasizing about like how the hustle is going to do it for you, that's going to be your key to success. And yeah, you got to work for it, you got to put the work in, you got to do it, you got to show up, but you also have to be your whole self to be present. And
Yeah,
that's really the gift you give the world, is
yeah,
being authentically who you are.
it reminds me of that. I forget what class it was, but the book I think is called A Congruent Life.
Yes.
Yeah, like that one. As you're saying that, I'm like, oh yeah, I might have to dig that.
Palmer, right?
I don't know if he wrote it or not. I'm not sure. I don't remember who wrote it. But I think about that, like it feels like what you're saying is like you're becoming more and more congruent with who you are and what you want to do, and then that also overflows into what you do for a living.
And I remember reading that book, and it just was shortly after the time that I finally had the courage to leave a law practice that wasn't soul filling for me. And I think he wrote that book kind of in the context of being an educator, being a teacher. But for me, I could just insert myself as leader, lawyer, person, and it gave words to what I felt in my heart about who I am, words that I didn't have before, because I was practicing in a really strict, historically misogynistic career. And it's, which is all about hierarchy and who you are and status and all of that. But that never connected with me. So when I read that book, I was like, oh, okay. So it gives me permission, right, to reassess who I am and how I want to show up in the world. And that is making choices that are aligned with your values and your sense of being.
Yeah, absolutely. And Maggie, I want to kind of shift just a little bit, because for me, I don't know, I haven't figured it out yet, but like this inherent heart for like First Nations, Indigenous tribes. It depends on where you're at on their preference of speaking that.
Yes.
But like I went to a powwow for the first time about 5 years ago, since I was a kid. I had gone when I was a kid, and just like the spirituality of that. And then, there's so many tribes here where I live. And then as I drove cross country to go to Kansas City, I became so much more aware of how many tribes I was passing, right? Like through South Dakota and Kansas, and it was really interesting to me. And I just have this like almost like if I have other lives, like somewhere I was like in that, right? And
Awesome.
and so I'm really curious, like, because I don't know, I think about like the earth and how I'm hearing this swing of now, like the earth is providing what we need for medicine. The earth is providing what we need for global warming. It's like, it's been there all along. We've just gotten in the way. And for me, most of the people that I've talked to that come from a tribe have this inherent respect for the earth. I'm doing a gross overgeneralization here, but just, like, I think there's so much to learn from some of the practices and And I don't know, so I'm just interested to hear like some of the things that maybe surprised you as you went to work there, some of the struggles that maybe you've seen, you know, even through COVID and some of that. I'm just interested to hear your perspective on some of that.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. And of course, this is just my experience working in this region where I am in northern Alberta. And they're like the Indigenous communities across the world are each unique, and even like our closest neighbors may not, may identify as Cree or Dene or a whole bunch of different cultures. So I'm just going to speak about the First Nation that I work for, which are Denesuline people. So the Dene community extends really from like northern, like Alaska, Yukon, and it goes right down into like Utah, Arizona, for the Dene speaking peoples. And Dene means people, actually, in the language. So where the community where I serve, we're a bit unique because we are close to the oil sands, which is like one of the most largest human-made construction in the whole earth. And this is to extract oil from like the sandy areas that are in this region. And that has been going on for about 50, 60 years. And the communities have, the Indigenous communities around here, which have been here since time immemorial and will still be here after industry shuts down in however many decades. And their main concern is being able to practice their traditional ways of being, traditional ways of knowing. And yes, I think you used the word respect for the land, which absolutely that is the case. But it's like a deep, almost like at a deeper level, like a more profound connection to the land. So when the land, the water is impacted by industry or whatever else is going on in the world, it really impacts their way of being now from like practicing their traditional ways. And further, they're thinking 7 generations ahead. And that's what's another aspect that's beautiful about Indigenous communities, that it's not about the here and now. Decisions that are made are for 7 generations ahead. So the First Nation I work for is very committed to preserving treaty rights, which are treaties that Canada here made with the Indigenous communities. There's 11 numbered treaties throughout Canada, and our territory is Treaty 8 here. And that was signed in 1899. And there are certain expectations that the government should do. And this is kind of where my passion and background of justice, maybe I didn't like practicing law itself, but I have that inherent sense of justice. So I'm very passionate about righting historical wrongs and constantly holding governments accountable for honoring the treaties, respecting the land, creating legislation, co-creating legislation, because we want to be part of the creation of the legislation that would protect the land, protect the water, protect the language and traditional ways of being from the negative impacts of industry development or climate change. And the First Nation I work for has been a voice not only in this region, but nationally and also internationally on this issue. In fact, we'll be going to, once again, to the UN, to the Climate Change Conference, to share our First Nations experience with how this the modernization technology industry has really impacted traditional peoples who have been here forever and will still be here forever. So I'm very passionate about that. And in addition to like the environmental issues, it's the Indigenous communities, I would say probably all over the world, especially North America and especially in Canada, have been historically disenfranchised, have a history of forced schooling in Canada. I think in the US there was some of that, but Canada was much worse, having the residential school system. So literally RCMP ripping children from their parents, forcing them to live in religious schools, not speak their language, at the risk of being hurt or abused. And that happened for 100+ years. And the last residential school closed in Canada was right next to us in the province of Saskatchewan. That closed in 1996. So,
wow.
Right? So it's like historical wrongs, but it's like current historical wrongs. Like that's living memory. And a lot of the elders in my community, or the community that I serve, they have that remembrance of the residential school life. The residential school in the community burned down in the 70s. But the impacts of that school, that experience, negative experience, exactly. So there's that intergenerational trauma, and all of the negative ways of coping with that is really impactful to families, to keeping those practices up, because they're still dealing with so much pain and trauma from their experiences. And unfortunately, that's often handed down. But that's similar in so many other communities, right? But
and Maggie, I have to tell you, like, it makes me angry because I did not like, it makes me angry at the US educational system with like history and what we teach in the schools, because I did not know any of this and I'm embarrassed to say this, but I did not realize, other than you see movies and things that happen, but I did not realize to the extent of what it was until my then husband and I went up to the Okanagan Valley, and there's one of two, I guess, Indigenous tribal owned wineries in North America that's there. And they had this museum, and it's well done. It's not a huge museum. It's a smaller museum, but it was so well done. And I walked out of there feeling like I had been beaten up. And that is, I don't mean that as disrespectful to what happened or that it was anywhere close to what happened. I just was like, my heart was, and it's still, I'm speechless. And me, that doesn't happen very often at like just the atrocities that happen. And frankly, in the name of Christianity, like, it just ticks me off, and I have to let go of that anger. But it's like, it's heartbreaking.
But I don't want you to let go of the anger. We don't want you to let go of the anger. We want you to have that righteous anger and that idea that you'll be now an advocate for that to never happen again.
Yeah.
Any disenfranchisement, any discrimination, like, that is what leads to those residential schools, leads to the Holocaust. Like, we have to be vigilant about making sure and making deliberate, meaningful actions for that not to happen again. I think it was 2021, a school, the community, First Nations community around Kamloops in British Columbia, they had ground penetrating radar that was around the school, and they were looking to see if there was any children in unmarked graves. And like, I knew that happened. Of course I knew that happened, but Canada as a whole was completely rocked that there were 215 children bodies found near that former residential school. And so now communities all over Canada are also doing this ground penetrating radar to know once and for all what the actual numbers are. So the churches like kept lists, but the lists weren't accurate. And can you imagine being a parent, having your child taken away from you, put in the school, and then never coming home and never given an answer? What happened to your child? Or what happened to my child? Yeah. Ran away, but they didn't run away. So I think that's important to keep mindful in your heart that we do have to do the work, and you feel angry, you feel hurtful, you feel like this is so wrong. So harness that, and it's all of our responsibilities to make sure that never happens again. Continuing with the Indigenous communities around North America, around the world, but also any disenfranchised community. There's two Jewish values that I had learned previously in a previous life, but have really adopted and integrated into my life now. So one is called Tikkun Olam, and Tikkun Olam means repairing the world. So the underlying theory is that it's not our job to fix everything. It's not our job to make everything perfect, but you have to do the work. You have to do work that will repair all of the negative things that happen in your world, like living that with that intentionality to create meaningful change. Yeah. The second Jewish value is pursuit of justice. So there's a commandment in the Hebrew Bible that says justice you shall pursue. And that absolutely underscores how I show up for my work and how I show up in my life, frankly, to rectify these injustices, maybe imperfectly, but doing the work, creating awareness, even if it's scary to or jarring to people, that just ensures that there is that awareness of the injustice, and so that hopefully it won't happen again.
Yeah, it's interesting. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, like, that's how the reconciliation happens. Yeah. Reconciliation with Indigenous communities is being aware, being accountable, not only for governments, but for all of us. Like, we're all part of the human family. So your heart should hurt. And to know the harsh truths of someone else's lived experience. And sometimes the current experience too. So I'm completely passionate about what we do at Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation, ACFN, and I'm so proud of our leadership and the community as a whole for really coming together and making a difference to raise awareness on these issues regionally, provincially, nationally, and internationally.
Yeah, it's interesting, and we're kind of coming to the end of our time here, but have you ever seen the movie Freedom Riders with Hilary Swank? It's an older movie.
I didn't see it. It's Oprah, right? I think I was involved in it as a producer, but I know
I don't know.
Context of it.
It's about it might be about 20 years old. Patrick Dempsey's in it and Hilary Swank. And anyway, it's one of my very favorite movies. And I had watched this about 20 years ago. And in it, she takes them to the Museum of Tolerance in LA. And so I have been wanting to go to this. And just a couple of weekends ago, I was able to go for the first time. And so for me, it's also about like educating myself to know that it's different than what I was taught, right? Because for me, it's about understanding and knowing what happened and also feeling it. I think so many times, I know I can only speak for myself. There's been times in life that I just shut it off and thought, oh, like just, I don't know if it was just to deal with it, I don't know, but like just to feel it. And to your point, thank you for giving me permission to be, like righteously angry, because it just, there's a lot of things that I have to be careful I don't go too far into, because I get like really worked up about it. And
good. I like it.
Yeah.
That's why we're sisters. Feeling it, and I'd go one step deeper.
Yeah.
Process it to really align it with whatever's within you. You have to embody it. You have to feel it. It has to go through you. And it's that physical, deep understanding. It's not just the brain thinking, the heart feeling. It's like that gut embodiment of those feelings. So, I don't want everybody to walk around feeling like I gotta go on this spiritual journey and challenge myself. It's not that. I would say that you should do that in every aspect of your life. And I've only learned that as I age, because when I was younger, it was just like in and out in the brain, never feeling. So now I've trained myself to feel, and I'm working on that embodiment, because that embodiment allows that passion to really bloom, and invites others to have that same experience, and so that they too can be show up in their world in a more meaningful, connected way.
Yeah. Maggie, thank you. This has been a pleasure, and I'm so happy that you agreed to come on and talk about your life and your experiences. And so thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful.
I have one last question, and I know we're running over on time, but I just what was the turn on to the flogs? For those of you that don't know,
my Fluvogs?
Fluvogs, thank you.
Yes. Okay, so John Fluvog, Canadian designer. I think it's just fluvog.com if you are not familiar. And these are wild, wacky, maybe not wacky, but really shoes with a point of view. Let's say that. Specific point of view, edgy. So I've always loved fashion. When I was like 7, I had a subscription to Vogue, and I always thought myself like being in a creative fashion world, but now I just, the office is my runway these days. But I do have a passion for shoes and art, and I really think it's those special pieces, those interesting shoes are art investments that you can wear, and are
they comfortable?
I love it. The key is comfort, honey. Those products, they're designed so well for comfort, for style, and unforgettable. I still remember seeing some Fluvogs when I was like 12 or 13, downtown Toronto, walking by the Fluvog store. And I still search for those vintage ones to get that back. And I've got 3 pairs so far. So I'm still on the hunt for more, but that's part of the adventure of the hunt now, is finding those vintage ones that are just as cool today as they were years ago. And I highly recommend being part of yourself is having your own personal style unapologetically. So we got to live that kind of life.
Yeah, I love them. And if you want to see some of them, go out and follow Maggie on Instagram. So I just had to add that, because I haven't asked you that question in the past. So
yeah, but Instagram, my handle is at Mummy Maggie. So Mummy with a U.
Yep.
So, yeah, awesome. Well, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure to connect and chat about these really important things.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you listening, we will see you next week. And with that, it's a wrap. Thanks, folks. Thanks so much for listening. The song Ride is co-written and sung by Miss Jackie Wilson and her collaborators Tyler Banks, David DJ Lee, and Chris Renee. And a huge shout out to them for allowing us to use this perfect song. Everyone have a fabulous week, and I'll talk to you next week.